Some people complain about getting socks for Christmas. However, they're a very handy gift, especially for those who are homeless, which is what a new initiative by Elliott Footwear is aiming to tackle. And joining me is co-founder of the vegan footwear brand, Sam Carew. Hello, Sam.
Hey, Cassandra. How you doing? Thanks for having me on the show.
No, thank you for being here, man. I wanted to first of all just say that what you're doing is amazing in regards to vegan footwear, because I don't think a lot of people think about that. But to have brands that are conscious of it, it's a really great thing to do. Where did the passion for this come from?
So I guess the first thing, my first involvement was with Elliott was random. I started watching a YouTube video about climate change, and one of the top things you can do to help climate change is to have less children. And my wife and I were pregnant with number 4.
Wow.
So we were like, okay, we're not doing our part. But and then a friend of mine that I used to work with, and one of his friends had this kind of initiative, and they said, "Oh, Sam, did you want to come on board and help us grow it?" And I was in the middle of, at the time, I was in quite a, I guess, a down period. I just left my job that I'd been there for 12 years. I kind of struggled with identifying who I was out of that role, in a sense of, I was this IT guy for so long, and all of a sudden I didn't have that, identity of myself. So yeah, it was a really tough time, and this gave me an opportunity to do something different, something I'd never worked on before. I'd never run a business. I'd never run a footwear company before, and it gave me an opportunity to do something different and really interesting. So the concept of vegan footwear came from just trying to imagine, what if you were starting from scratch, what would a new footwear brand look like? What would it, we had the opportunity to do, what Nike and Adidas have done, many years ago now, but we were kind of at the genesis of it, and like, okay, where do we start? And we've been able to become climate positive in 2019 compared to Adidas's forecast of 2023, I think it is.
Wow, that's amazing. I'm glad to hear that, man. And as well, just to know, if anyone is listening, the shoes are really, really good. Now, when I used to think of vegan footwear, I used to think that they'd be like, I don't know, made of things that I wouldn't want to wear. But looking at the website, looking at the shoes, looking at the footwear, they are very, very appealing, very well made. So I thought I'd have to just say that, just in case anyone was like, vegan footwear. It's a bit like when people think about vegan food and they're like, it's got to taste disgusting. Actually, it is really nice.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Yeah.
But
and thank you for saying that. I think, when you're starting out, you want to try and create something that's really simple. Well, that's what we chose. Our founders originally were two guys from Denmark, so they had that kind of Scandinavian feel of design, and wanted to create something really minimalist, a simple kind of silhouette of shoes. So that's what we did, and I'm really pleased with what we've come up with. And then, we've been operating now since June of 2019. So just over 2.5 years.
You should be very proud, very, very proud.
Thank you. It's a learning curve. I think it's a massive learning curve, and I'm 43, so it's not typically the age people go around starting companies. But I think my, part of the things that inspired me is the idea that, like the Bible says, with God, all things are possible. And this is something that is seemingly impossible, I guess, looking at timelines of how people begin and start and operate companies. But here we are, we're doing it.
Here we are, man. You are doing it, and you've just joined forces as well with two other brands that align with what you do. Greenr, who tackle our carbon footprints, and Jollies, who donate socks to the homeless. We're going to get onto how you guys are working together and how people can both reduce their carbon footprints and give to the homeless and get themselves for socks later on in the interview. But I first wanted to ask, what for you is, or would you say is the biggest roadblock when talking to people about these issues? Because a lot of the times when people hear of these things, they may switch off, or they may not really understand it, or they may have the opinion, well, what am I going to do? What do you think is the biggest roadblock, and how have you overcome that with what you're doing?
Good question. I think I very much lean into the idea that change happens incrementally, right? And we're not going to change the planet tomorrow, but if we're all doing a little bit today, then we might change it the day after tomorrow. Unlikely, but we're going to change it in the future. So I think I very much align with that thinking of, okay, just little steps by lots of people make big change. So my dad's been notorious for recycling as long as I can remember. And I guess maybe, subconsciously that stuck. But it's the idea that, okay, we can make something out of something that's already existed. So why don't we just do that? And if everyone had that thinking, then we'll be further along the line of where we are. So, Elliott's primary function and goal is to, is tackling climate change. And that seems like a very big ask. But I think, after kind of 2 years of being in the space right now, I think there's a lot of people that are starting to come along that type of thinking, right? Okay, what we want to do is reduce the number of fossil fuels we're using, which will in turn lower the temperature of the earth. When you say it like that, it sounds so easy, but it's just individual steps. So I'll give an example. My parents now have to, so the government have enforced a rule to not allow older cars within the ULEZ, boundaries. So, and that might seem like a really harsh thing to do, but what it's done is that my dad's 80, and it started his thinking of, okay, if I'm going to get a new car now, I want to get one that's eco-friendly, one that's, better for the environment. And as much as it being a really harsh, because in essence, right now, they can't actually go and visit my sister because of this boundary. But it means that his thinking has changed. So as much as it's a tough government rule that they've made, it's starting to make an impact and starting to change people's thinking of what we should do in terms of the things that we own, in terms of the things that we decide to spend our money on. But there's lots of different initiatives. I think it's really exciting the time we're in right now. What's going to happen? It
is a really exciting time because a lot of things have popped up, and a lot of people have become more generally health conscious, earth health conscious, and health conscious as well. So I think it is a very exciting time just to see what happens. So you did mention the Bible earlier, which tells me that you're Christian, and that's why we're here. But when it comes to Christians in particular, why should Christians, would you say, care about the climate?
I think the simplest answer is God put Adam and Eve in charge of the garden. That was their primary function, to tend to the earth. That hasn't changed with us, right? Sin's entered the world, which means it's more difficult, but it's still our responsibility. That's I guess a simple answer, but that's why I would say that's what we should do. This is our responsibility to tend to the earth, and in in 2021, it looks like electric cars or hybrid cars. It looks like recycling. It looks like buying climate positive trainers. It looks like a number of different things in 2021, but back in the garden, or 100 years ago, it would have looked very different. It's still our responsibility, and especially as believers, I would love for us to be set an example.
Yeah, I love that answer. It makes complete sense. And I want to ask you a second question, kind of playing devil's advocate, because a lot of people would say, well, God has set the world out to be as the world is. Why don't we just let it run as it is? We know how the world is going to end. Why fiddle with that if that makes sense? If we know that's going to happen because the Bible says, okay, this will happen, this will happen, this will happen. Why should we care? I've heard that argument from Christians before. What would your response be if someone is listening in right now thinking, why, we know what's going to happen?
And you know what? If I'm honest, I probably had that thinking myself. I think the challenge I found was that we know how the world's going to end. But so Jesus asks us to be fishers of men. And he knew how the world's going to end, right? So he still asked us to have this mandate to share his gospel, right? If we're saving, we are not doing the saving specifically, but it's within a mandate that he's given us to share the gospel, which is saving souls. And that also impacts the saving the world. Like I said, we know what it's going to look like in the end, but it doesn't take away our responsibility of what we do now.
Yes,
I like that. I think that. Yeah, and I it's so easy to just use that as an excuse or not excuse. It's easy to use that as a thinking. Well, what's the point? Why do we have to do anything? But we still have a responsibility to people and the planet that we live on.
Yeah, and I think it may be about just making it a nicer planet to be while we're here. But our children's, we just want it to be a nicer place to live because we've been given it, we're on it, so why not make it a nicer place? So back to you working together with Greenr and Jollies. Tell us about that collaboration. So as I said earlier, Greenr, they work at reducing our carbon footprints, individual ones as well. So I did download the app and I had a look at it, and I looked at my carbon footprint and I was like, I'm not actually that bad. I was expecting worse. But I'm not that bad. There's definitely ways that I can improve it, but it is really interesting just to see how you as an individual want to do that. And then Jollies, they give socks to the homeless, which, as we know, I did say earlier that a lot of people complain about getting socks, but actually a lot of people really do need them. So how Elliott Footwear working with these two companies, and what are you doing with them?
So that was a really interesting one. I found the sock brand and I thought they looked amazing, and did a bit of digging to find out that Ed Vickers, the founder, is actually a believer. I was like, oh, that's perfect. So I just dropped him a message on Instagram to say, love your socks. I'd love to have a chat about doing a collaboration. So we found that we weren't able to make an impact in kind of the darker times of the year when people aren't going on holiday and buying white trainers or canvas trainers, and it's like, okay, what can we do to still make the impact that we've offset, as at the last count, over 600 tons of CO2, which is like the weight of the Eiffel Tower, which is a pretty big deal. And however, during the kind of November, December time, we weren't making any sales. Okay, that means we're not able to make any offsets. So I reached out to Jolly, told them what we did, and to be honest, there could have been a whole different number of sock brands, but we really loved what they were doing with the homeless. So what their mission is that every time you buy a pair of socks, they would give a pair to a homeless shelter, which really resonated with me, especially during Christmas and, like I said, the darker times of the year. Ed, I think he's been running Jollies for over 10 years. And he said that it's the one thing people don't give to charity, right? A lot of times people would give a jumper or give a pair of jeans, but socks was something that people just didn't give. So it was, he made it his mission to be able to give. And we wanted to join alongside him. So we, every pair of Elliott and Jolly socks that you buy, we do an offset through Greenr, who are our partners, and then we also Jollies actually give a pair to the homeless shelter. So it's a really, for me, it's a big deal. I think it's, by the end of the year we'll be well on our mark to do 800 tons, which is pretty significant for a company that's so young.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. It must feel really great to know that you're making that kind of change with what you're doing. That's a great thing, man.
Thank you.
If we want to get involved, so say if someone just heard this and they've thought, I would love to get involved in that, because as we were saying earlier, people are becoming more health conscious. People are also becoming more conscious, I think, in general, of just wanting to help other people. So how can we do that? Where do we go?
Just elliottfootwear.com. And just click on the option to click on to get some socks, and I think that's the easiest way to get in touch with us. But yeah, I think we're trying to. It's a new company. We're learning so much on the way. We sell through Instagram, we sell through our own website, but typically we want to be able to make it easy for consumers to be able to and customers to purchase this and make an impact.
Yeah, it's a really easy website to navigate as well. So you can just head over to elliottfootwear.com and that'll be that. Final question.
2 L's and 2 T's.
2 L's and 2 T's. Elliott. So when I first saw this as well, one question that I had is how is the I might get this terminology incorrect, so how is the carbon monoxide offloaded? How does that happen?
Yeah, so what we did is that, as you can imagine, with every production of everything, there is a carbon cost as well as a financial cost. So what we did is that we worked with an early partner called Shoes, who are a Norwegian climate company, and what they helped us do was to try and give a relatively ballpark number of the production of a pair of Elliott's, and we did this calculation. We worked it out to be about 200 tons. Sorry, not 200 tons. 200 kilograms of carbon is created every time you make a pair of Elliott's, and it's quite high if you think about it, because we make small runs of shoes. So our first run was 1,200 pairs, whereas a company like Nike in 2018 sold 380 million pairs of shoes. So, it's a massive difference. So what we then did is that we decided to offset 5 times the amount, so we wouldn't ever be a scenario where we weren't overcompensating for the carbon cost of creating our shoes. However, in more recent time, we'd looked at some of our other shoe companies, Allbirds, and they're also a good competitive brand. They work really, they've done amazing things in the footwear industry, and what they've done is they worked out their calculation to be about 7 kilograms. So for us, it's a real challenge to be able to get that 200 number down and progressively down. I think 200 is a stretch in terms of our carbon cost, but the good thing is that we have a lower number to start to aim for, and then it will mean that we will carry on doing 1 ton of CO2 emissions. So the way that is calculated is that Choose and Greenr help run carbon, so they're verified carbon reducing projects globally, and some other competitors and some other companies, they plant a tree for every purchase you have, which is quite common now. But we wanted to do something different because you can't measure, it's harder to measure the impact of planting a tree. Where did you plant this tree? What kind of tree did you plant? So it makes it difficult to measure that carbon emissions from a tree that's planted. So we worked with 1 ton of CO2 emissions, which helps us kind of have a measurable number that we're able to kind of work towards.
Okay, it does make sense to me now, because I was a bit curious. I was like, what actually happens? What is the process? But now that you've explained it, that makes complete sense. So yes, if you have heard this today and you're thinking, I really want to get involved in this, maybe you've been thinking that you want to get more involved in helping your environment that you're in, or for your children as well, then please do visit and find out ways that you can help. What is the website again, please, Sam, just so that people can click on?
Elliott Footwear, ELLIOTT footwear.com.
Wonderful. Thank you. There you have it. Buying a pair of socks for yourself or someone else this Christmas could take on a whole new meaning. Thank you, Sam, for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Cassandra. It's really lovely to meet you as well.
You too.
Premier Gospel.